right, is the microphone working? Can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. So time flies. It's hard to believe that this is, getting close to one of the last presentations. But this is using the Developer Cloud Service with Exadata Express Cloud Service. And let's go ahead and get started because I hope to get you out of here at 12:14 so you can get a jump on the line and lunch. So my name is Jason Straub. I'm a principal member of technical staff. And before today, that third line used to say Oracle Application Express. But today it says Database Cloud Services. And an odd thing happened about, I'd say, 3 months ago. We have this internal employee directory called ARIA People. And it's one of the most used applications within Oracle. And for some reason, I was looking through our org, and I looked myself up, and I noticed I was in a different cost center called the Database Cloud Services. Now, it kind of makes sense because that's what my primary focus has been for the past, I'd say, more than a year, maybe close to 18 months. And I've been working on mostly the service called Exadata Express, which we're going to see a lot of today. And we're also going to see how that integrates with Application Express. I'm a longtime Oracle employee. I just celebrated my 15-year anniversary. And for those of you that are connected with me on LinkedIn are probably saying, wait a minute, I just got an anniversary notice that you've been there 11 years. So I actually have 2 tours at Oracle, and if you combine them both together, it makes 15 years. But as far as getting your anniversary gift, Oracle considers I get the full time, the full credit, so I got a 15-year gift. So I got a nice Visa check card, gift card, with a certain denomination on it. And that arrived earlier last week, and about a day after it arrived, my wife was driving around town and said she hit something, and that's also known as a curb. And she blew out 2 of my tires, so I know what I'm using the gift card on now. So, but if you see her at the conference later today, don't tell her I told that story. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to go over Exadata Express. I'll do a very brief overview just to talk about what the capabilities of that service is, but we're mostly going to do demonstration today. And so we're going to demonstrate Exadata Express, demonstrate the capabilities, different ways to connect to it, things you can do with it. It's got Application Express in it. We are in the Application Express track, so I'm going to make this very Application Express focused. But I'm also going to talk about the Developer Cloud Service, which I have to admit I'm not an expert on, but we do have in the back of the room Shai Smeltzer, who is the product manager. So I'll go through a very brief overview of what it is, and more, I'm going to show you what it means for you as an Application Express developer, why you might be interested in, especially if you buy the Exadata Express service as well. So then we'll go into a roadmap of some things coming up for both services, and hopefully have some time for question and answer. And because we're going to talk about futures, I have to put this slide up. Who here has not seen this slide? You're probably sick of also people making snarky comments like, well, this slide means that I can just, spout off fake news or whatever, but I said it anyway. So we are going to talk about futures, so please do not hold me to anything that I show. So what is the Exadata Express Cloud Service? Well, it's a fully managed Oracle database that's running in the cloud. Interestingly, it was announced at last Oracle Open World during Larry Ellison's keynote. So he actually announced 2 things at that time. One was this new service, but also the fact that this service was based on the next version of database 12. So it was based on 12.2. So the first time you could get access to that database as a customer was through this service. Now, it runs directly on Exadata hardware, which means it's not running in a virtualized environment. So that means that you can take advantage, if you know how to, Exadata unique features. I'll talk about one of those. It includes drivers as well, if you're interested in programming in other languages such as Java or .NET or C++ or Ruby. Now here we say today that it's perfect for smaller, medium-sized databases, application development, line of business apps. And the reason we say that is because today, and I'm going to stress today, you can only buy a service up to 50 gigabytes. So you're probably not going to run your enterprise ERP applications on this service because of that storage limitation. But what's really nice is that it has an all-inclusive price starting at $175 a month. So for $175 a month, you can get the smallest service, which is a 20 gigabyte service. And it includes everything. So it includes the 12.2 database plus most database options. That's Enterprise Edition. You get access to, since it's running on Exadata features. It includes support. So everything's all in one price. You're not, we're not nickel and diming you after that. You pay the $175, you get the 20 gigabytes. I have a question in the front row. The question is, does it include Oracle Graph? I'm not familiar with that product, but no, I'm pretty sure it does not. Oh, so then yes. There are some spatial features and some database features that aren't enabled yet, particularly ones that depend on Java in the database. So I'll caveat that as well. But what it is a full Oracle database that you get access to, your own database. It's a pluggable database, but no other customer is in your database. It is your pluggable database. I mentioned that it's Enterprise Edition plus the relevant options. You can take advantage of unique capabilities of Exadata, but also what's very nice is you get SQLnet access to it, which means that you can connect via your favorite client. So you're not constrained to just accessing the service like another service called the Database Schema service, through a web interface, through REST, or through Apex. You can also connect clients like SQL Developer, SQL CL, SQL Plus. The service is managed by us, so you don't have to take care of administration tasks or day-to-day tasks. And it's very fast provisioning. So once you sign up and you get your services and you pay for either one or more, once you say create instance, it's very quick before the instance is provisioned and you get an email saying how you can connect to it. Yes? You can connect via JDBC, yes. And in fact, that might be on this slide. Well, there's popular language drivers. JDBC is one of the drivers that you can use. So anything for Java, Node.js, .NET, C++. So you can really access it through a variety of different languages and platforms. There's multiple interfaces, so you can write SQL statements. So you can connect to the service and write SQL statements, but there's also, you have access to REST API. So ORDS, Oracle REST Data Services, front ends the service, so you have complete capability of doing RESTful style services. And you also get access to something new called document type storage and collections, so that you can just store schemaless types of documents directly in the database. So like a JSON document, for example. We're actually going to go through all three of these interfaces in the demo today. Yes?
What kind of bandwidth we can get? Well, I connected via a client and I want to get lots of data, but I guess there's some limitation.
Yeah, so of course there's going to be some limitation on that because there will be, obviously, if you're accessing from on-prem to this service itself. It will depend on where that service is. The service currently is in the US in a Chicago data center, and as well in Europe in an Amsterdam data center. So depending on where you are and the network latency between it, you might experience some slowness or not. So, but I don't have a number like statistics or anything like that on.
I'm going to imagine it's going to be pretty hard to get like one-off patches and stuff like that if you had to.
Yes, so you would the database would be patched by us, and if you had some particular need for a particular patch for your PDB, you have to wait until obviously we're going to take care of the whole container. Okay, so there are updated tools as well. So your favorite tools like SQL Developer have been updated to work directly with this service. And it includes low-code, no-code, rapid application development environment, Application Express. Currently 504 in Chicago, but if in Europe and you land on the Amsterdam data center, you're going to be on 511. But we'll soon be on at least the 5.1 version here very soon. But safe harbor. So it's a 12.2 database, as I mentioned, so it's packed with all kinds of features that you can exploit in the 12.2 database. A lot of these features that you see here are either new or greatly improved for 12.2, but since your service is this 12.2 database, you get access to that. The one thing that I'll mention is I mentioned that you have access to unique features of Exadata because it's running directly on an Exadata platform. One of those is this Exadata hybrid columnar compression. And what that is, it's a compression feature that works better on Exadata than just a standalone database because you have less of a trade-off between compression and performance when you write your SQL queries. But you also get add-on options for security. So you get advanced security, which allows you to use things like virtual private database. You can use real application security, which I believe is just included with enterprise option, but also data redaction as well. And we're actually going to do a little demo of data redaction. So of course, the service is secure. Your client communications to the PDB are encrypted using the latest encryption technology. All of your web access is over HTTPS, so your access to the service console, which we're going to show, and as well Application Express is over HTTPS, and as well when you make a web service call out, that is all done through HTTPS as well. And then, yes, question in front row.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to understand. For instance, for Apex, I'm using a glass fish. So in this platform, then I don't need to create that application server instead of that use the one that you are providing.
Right. When you provision the service, then you could just use the boards that we have set up in our infrastructure and our WebLogic infrastructure actually to access it. Now, because you have access to the drivers, you could set up your own to connect to this service, but the network latency, I wouldn't recommend that. Yes, Anton in the back.
If this is too detailed, skip over it, but I often find I'm trying to make an Apex REST service call out, or web service call out of the database. I've got to install additional client CA certs and so forth at the database. So I know inbound this isn't an issue, but if I'm making outbound calls to secure SMTP, secure web services and so forth, how would I get the database to have those additional certificates?
The answer is you don't. So you don't have access to just adding any of your own certificates to the standard wallet that we have. So it's the same thing as the database schema service. So whatever wallet we're using for that cloud service will have those same certificates in that, and we don't just put in, if you say, oh, I got this certificate that I need.
My most common problem is that I can't get my own certificate or
Yeah, because you guys don't have the
your own certificate.
That is interesting. Maybe we'll do a demo of that.
So if you do that, it would be great.
Okay. And another question in front?
Yeah, right now, your cloud service is provide 5.1.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, 6 months later, 5.2 can come and you will update this version. But I want to use 5.1.
Yeah, so also the way it's currently working now, and especially for the patch sets that we're going to update, is everybody goes at the same time and we tell you. We wanted to come up with a mechanism to allow you to on-demand do that, and technically there really is no reason that we can't do that, because the way we have it architected, we have Application Express local in the PDB, and we did that for this actual reason, to be able to offer that in the future. I can't say it's coming in the next 5.2, we'll have that already. But yeah, that would be a very nice thing to have. So I'm going to go over this slide very quickly, because I want to get to the demos and actually get through all the demos. But just as a quick summary of capabilities, you get the Oracle Database 12.2. It's running on Exadata. You get your own PDB. You have access to this service console that we're going to show here in just a minute, where you can do things, some management tasks for your service. Your web interface to it is Application Express. So that means you can access, SQL Workshop and those type of things. You do have SQL interface over SQLnet, so you could use your favorite client to connect. But as well, you have a REST interface for it, because like I said, it's front-ended with ORDS, Oracle REST Data Services. You can access data via REST APIs, either using the traditional SQL Workshop REST API method, or as well just the ORDS method, where you enable a schema and then do some PL SQL to build your REST services. It also contains schemaless documents, as I mentioned, and we're going to show that for SOTA. So how do I load data? Since you have SQLnet access, you can use SQL Loader. You can use SQL Developer, drag and drop. You can use traditional Application Express data loading utilities. You can also just do DML from your DB client. So if you're connected via SQL CL, you can import data very easily using that. And as well, you can do REST calls over ORDS, so you can get data in that way. So comparing it with something called the Oracle Database Schema Service, this service is going to be much more flexible. The regions that the service is available today is only the North America and Europe, but we plan to go to worldwide, such as the schema services today. Your connectivity in Exadata Express, as I mentioned, you get SQLnet access to it, whereas in the schema service, you don't get SQLnet access. You can only access through REST or Apex or the Java service if you buy one of those. But one of the key differentiators as well is that in the schema service, in your service, you could only ever have one schema. And we're going to show in this service, you can create as many schemas as you want. And someone's going to ask a question that I'll get to in the futures about, well, what about multiple workspaces? It's my own PDB. That may be coming, but you got to hold on. So let's do a demonstration. First, I'm just going to go through, this services console. But then we're going to go through a scenario where, I might be a lone developer developing locally, and my application has matured enough that I want to move it to a development platform that everybody, worldwide, all my team can access and start doing development there. So we're going to do a demonstration where we shift that development to the Exadata Express Cloud Service. So first, let's explore the Exadata Express Cloud Service a little bit. make sure I haven't been logged out yet. No, I haven't. So when I log into my Exadata Express service, I buy it, I get the email, I get this URL to something called My Services. I come to this dashboard, and this is very similar dashboard to all of our cloud services. What you can see in this particular identity domain, which is just a collection of users in my service, I have this developer cloud service. I have an Apex service, which is that traditional database schema service, as I mentioned. And I also have Exadata Express. But we want to talk about Exadata Express today, so let's explore this a little bit. So if I click that, I'll see I have these services, and I have multiple services. I don't know what David's doing out here with a service, but I have this dev service, I have this demo service, and I have this prod service. And good thing I'm not working in these two services, because it looks like I have them down for some reason. But that could be, if you could think of that scenario where you have multiples of these services, and you can have the dev service, and then we'll show you how you can integrate doing an export, import, and then you can move that onto production when you're ready for that. So I can have multiple services. From this screen, I can just look at different metrics of my services. And so I can look at the storage that I've used. I can get a table count, or I can get an object count, average object count, those type of things. So just some dashboard metrics. I also could add users if I wanted to. So I just click on the Users tab, and I would click Add, and then I would choose their roles, and by choosing their roles I could decide which of the services that I have that I want them to be able to access. So now let's go into this dev service. And look at the service console. So here's the service console for my service. You can see by the URL that it is an Apex application. The F*P is a telltale sign of that. So we have this Apex application to manage my Dev CS service. It's broken up into three main categories: your web access, your client access, and your administration. So you can do some administration tasks. You can click on these Learn More links to read about it, or you can watch a video if you want for each of these tasks. So a lot of people like to see videos as opposed to reading documentation, so we have all that provided. So under web access, I have access basically to go directly to different parts of Application Express. So if I click on one of those links, I think I click to go directly to the SQL Workshop. I should go to the SQL Workshop. Under client access, you'll see that I have this thing where I can disable client access. If I hadn't enabled it yet, that would say enable client access. But I already have it enabled, so it says disabled. And I might want to disable it like in a break glass emergency. I just want everybody who's ever downloaded what we're going to look at next, these client credentials, to not be able to access the service anymore. I could also download those drivers I was talking about. So connect via Java, C, C++, Node.js. That's all included here. But let's go ahead and download some credentials so I can actually access this service. And so here, I'm giving a password for a Java key store. So when I connect with certain Java clients, I'm going to have to remember what password I typed there to encrypt some things, the Java keys, and use that. So I can just go ahead and download that. And I'll go ahead and save the file. And the file is just this zip file, clientcredentials.zip. And I'll save that. Let me go here and take a look at that file. And so what's included in this file is a certificate, some Java key store things that I use for other clients. There's a SQLnet.aura and a TNSnames.aura. And this is for clients like the instant client, SQL Plus, to be able to tell how to connect which certificate to use to this service. But to actually connect, I'm going to have to know a database user to connect as. And so we have this built-in one, and this is going to be under administration, called PDB-admin. So I can set the password for PDB-admin. And what PDB-admin is a DBA-like account. It doesn't have the full DBA role, but it has many of those same roles or same privileges, so that you can use this to do things like create, other users. So now, why don't we go ahead and just use this client credentials.zip to connect using the instant client. So if I go to my network admin directory, I would just unzip the client credentials here. And you'll see if I look at this TNSnames.aura, you'll see that there's this one alias in here called dbaccess. So now I can connect using SQL Plus using that TNS alias. Fantastic. Ooh. Yeah. Well, I can go change it again. So let's try that again. It might be. Oh, I guess it's not. Anywho, I'm now connected to my Exadata Express service, which I think is kind of neat to be able to access your service, your PDB over the cloud, using a traditional client like SQL Plus. And so with this PDB admin account, like I mentioned, I can do some administrative tasks. So one of the things I could do is I could create a new user. So let's go ahead and do that, create a user docs, which we're going to use later. Here, I'll put even a worse password in here. That's fantastic too. Identified. So let's give it a default table space and quota unlimited on that. All right. How about we go to a script where I have that already typed out and copy and paste. Might be a more efficient way to do it. User created, great. So now still to be able to connect as this user, I'm going to have to do a couple of grants. So I need to be able to create a session. And I'm just going to grant resource so that I can, well, does anybody know the password? No, I still have to do the grant. For some reason, it kicked me off. All right, so now I have this user docs that we're going to use a little bit later, and I can do something with it. So let me just go back to the service console and show a couple more things. So we can create a document store. We'll come back to that. I can also manage Application Express. So I can set up application archiving, so it would automatically create archives of my Application Express applications. I can do schema association, so here I can add to my workspace other schemas, like that one I just created if I wanted to. And as well, and let's go ahead and do that. So let's add a schema association. Let me choose docs and associate that schema. So now, when I go into SQL Workshop, I'll be able to see objects in the docs schema that we just created. So, the scenario that I mentioned before is that I have been developing locally this application, and that wasn't enough letters for welcome 1.1. And you don't know, it could be Oracle. So here's the application. And it's just this simple application where from HR, I got this export of HR data, and I simply uploaded it, and I created a quick application where I can go in and view all the employees here, and as well, I have a nice form where I can edit information if I want to. So the idea is I want to move this application to my Exadata Express dev instance, right? So I have to do a couple things. I have to move the schema and the data associated with this application. And as well, I need to export this application and import the application into the dev.cs instance. So first, I guess while I'm here, why don't I just go ahead and export the application so I have that ready. Let's just go ahead and export. And I'll call it Employees app and save it. And now I need to get that schema over there and the data. So let me go back to the service console. And let me just go ahead and create the same database schema. It happens to be in a schema called HR on my local database, so I'll create a schema, just name the same thing. I don't have to, but I will. I also could have connected via SQL Plus and typed a bunch of stuff and maybe made a mistake, but this is an easier way to get another schema into my service. So I have some options down here as well. I could define a new dedicated table space, but I'll just have it use the default one that's there. I could also enable Oracle REST data services right from here on the schema, so then I could use the ORD style RESTful services. So I'm going to go ahead and create that schema. Fantastic. It won't let me do that, or I would have. I'll type slower. Okay, so now I have another schema in my service, and it's called HR as well. So now we're going to connect to this service in a different way using SQL Developer. And the way I do that, and you can see I already have a connection to HR on my local database. I simply just add a connection, and I'll just call this HR on EECS. And for connection type, I choose Cloud PDB. And when I choose that, I have this option here to supply the configuration file. And I believe I put that in temp here. And then remember, when I downloaded these credentials, I supplied a password. I need to supply that here. So let's go ahead and test the connection. Whew, success. That's good. So now I am connected to my service using SQL Developer. So let's get that table from our local database, this employees table, and let's get it to our service. So that's very easy to do. Remember, one of the ways that I mentioned to get data into the service is drag and drop through SQL Developer. So I'm not used to using this type of resolution, so I'm going to have to try to drag very carefully and get it to move up here. Let's see here. All right. Keep going. Come on. So I drag it on the tables. Whew. So now I have some options that you'll see where I could just copy the DDL if I wanted to, or if the table already existed, I could just copy the data that I wanted to, but I just want to get the table there.
Now, is there anything like if it fails partway through that it can continue or restart?
Well, that's a good question. So if parts of that fail, and an example of that would be, and I don't have it set up on this, but I've done this before, where I had the whole HR schema, and there was relationships set up between employees and other tables like departments. So when I drag and drop, it would still work. The table would be there, all the data would be there, but in this log here that you can see, it would just, show me that error that, it couldn't create a constraint, for example, the foreign key. So now it looks like I have this table there. I can look at it, just confirm that the data is there as well, and it is. So now I'm ready to deploy the Application Express application. And so I just go back to Develop with App Builder from the Service Console. And I do an import, find that file that I just exported, Employees App. Just accept the defaults. I have the HR schema there, so it's going to go directly in that. I can reuse the application ID or assign a new one. Let's reuse it just to make it simple to have that line up between our local development and EECS development. So now I have the application installed. I'm going to run it, and there's no way for me to log in at this moment yet. And the reason is because in the cloud, by default, we're using cloud identity management. So I could create local Apex users in here, but I don't want to do that. I want to use the same set of users that I set up on the My Services page when I click that Users tab. I want them to be able to authenticate to these apps as well. So I add an authentication scheme. And we have on the cloud for you a Oracle Cloud Identity Management. So now when I create that, it makes it current. I can go back to my application Or I could have just run it from here. And now I don't see the login screen. I'm actually, logged in as my cloud IDM user, and I can see I have this suite application in ECS service. So now I've moved my local development here. Yes?
Is that using Oracle single sign-on, or what is it?
It's using Oracle Identity Management. It's just another product that we have, which you can configure with Oracle Single Sign-On, I believe. I don't know. Anton might.
I'm good, thank you.
All right.
When you first log into the services, you have to unlock the Apex user, right? It's already unlocked.
When you log into, yes. Yeah, that's right. When you create a service, the users that you initially provision it with have already been set up to be able to use Application Express as well.
How about network access?
So the network access isn't enabled, although you'll still be able to access Application Express by default once the service is provisioned, but you won't be able to do the connections to the database without enabling the client access. Yep. Another question, Anton?
I'm trying to formulate it. So, you copied that URL and you sent it to me. Would I be able to access that same app?
No, unless when I click that add button in the services console and I actually added you, then
As a user.
as a user,
But that's not my question.
okay,
So that URL is specific to your PDB, right?
yep.
I could have a PDB with an application 102. How would my URL be different than your URL?
Oh, here, that's a good point. Thank you for asking. But you see this dev-EECS dev. So dev is the name of my service, and EECS dev is the name of my identity domain.
So that's not a generic piece that's specific.
Right,
Okay.
right. And that's the same way we're going to access some RESTful services if we get to that point. No, just kidding. Yes, question back?
Yeah, can the end users have a different URL that is configured to my company?
So, yeah. So the question is, can the end users have a different URL that are specific to my company? It's a question that's often asked, and it's always answered the same way, and not really. You could accomplish that if you wanted to by running your own website with that URL that frames in probably this application, but we don't have, import your, domain name service here or whatever. We don't.
And we don't know the actual IP to be able to mask it?
Yes, you don't get access to that as a customer of this service, the actual IP. Now, database cloud service, which is something different, out of scope for today, you do get your public IP, which then you would at least have, but you still, I don't think, can go to GoDaddy or something and have it point directly to it. Yep, one more question?
Can the service actually connect out to an SMTP server, for example, for email notification, or do you provide an SMTP on that instance that we use?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The question is, can I basically just access my own SMTP servers?
Or do you provide
And
email notification as a...
And the answer is we do supply access to the Apex mail packages as part of the service, but you couldn't just specify your own SMTP server that you're using to make those requests.
Yeah, but even though I have access to the mail package, I need an SMTP server to relay the email.
Yeah, so that's,
Even though I have the package, I could call the function, but I still request the SMTP address and so on and so forth. So to be able to send those mail, I need to connect out, which means the ACL need to be open for the port, and I could go on.
so the other answer is, and something I really didn't mention but probably should have, is that even though that you have your own PDB and it's really like your own database, it's still a shared service. And so we've employed something called PDB lockdown profiles. And those type of things are explicitly prohibited. So you don't have direct access to util mail. You don't have access to util HTTP, for example. But you can, through Application Express, using a package called Apex Web Service, still make callouts. You're going to go through the proxy, our proxy that we define, and you're going to use our certificates, as Anton knows, to access those services. But yeah, we lock that down because it is a shared service, so you don't have access to that.
So port 25 is actually locked down, I couldn't call. I would have to use a service that would be available to port 80, or do a local call to, and then do it within the client.
You'll still send mail.
Yes, yeah, we still send mail, still have access to Apex Mail package, but that's your only access to mail, or the only way to do it.
Where do
Yep.
we see these certificates? If we wanted to connect with social media things, or Google, or whatever, do we know that those are in those 50 certificates, or?
I don't know that we have, like on our documentation, I don't know if we have the list of here are the top level certs that we've imported for our cloud service. That may be available, but I can get back to you on that. All right, so okay, let's do some more demo. All right, so a couple of things that I just wanted to show is, let's go back to SQL Developer. And let me get a new SQL worksheet. HR on EECS. And one of the things that I mentioned you have access to is compression features. So I could go ahead and issue this statement just saying alter table employees and store it compressed. And I can go ahead and run that. And I thought I would see some feedback. Oh. Oh, I'm glad I have you guys in this session. So, table employees altered. So, very nice. So, that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to show, another feature that you had access to, is something called data redaction. So, remember I said I got an export of all this data from HR. One of those columns you saw was the salary column. Well, maybe on dev in our cloud service, it's not appropriate to show that column. So, as PDB admin, if I grant execute on that package, dbms redact to HR, huh. All right, so grant succeeded there, and now I can run this code snippet to call dbms redact as HR, specifying the schema, the table, which column I want to redact, how I want to redact it, full redaction, and this expression 1 equals 1. So that means it's always going to be redacted. I could actually reference things like V function, so V of app user, so I could make this a little bit more, a little bit more specified, but for the demo, I'm just going to do all the time. So now, I'll just go ahead and execute this using this button. And it says PL SQL procedure successfully completed. Just to make sure, here is salary, and I refresh, and the salary is now gone. So I mentioned some things like schemaless document storage, so being able to put things in the database using something called SOTA. So let's go ahead and show that really quickly. So in order to do that, I have to go back to my service console, and I have to create this document store. So that enables or disables the schemaless document store. So if I click on this, I can choose an existing schema. I'll choose that doc schema, and then I'll enable SOTA for REST, Simple Object Document Access for REST. So we're going to interact with this via REST. So I create the document store on docs. So what does that allow me to do? Well, it allows me to make REST calls and store documents somewhere in the database. So I have this client called Postman here, and I can do some REST calls using this client. So let's just do something very quickly, and I'll show this when I get to Postman, the format of the URL. So once you enable this, then you have access using this URL, where it's your service URL all the way up to the part where you access Apex, and then you just simply reference the schema that you enabled for SOTA. And then to see what collections you already have, you could just send a GET request to SOTA latest, and I can use basic auth that uses my credentials that I use for this identity domain and send this request off. And basically, I get this JSON document back. It says items and then nothing. So I don't have anything here yet, right? So the idea is I want something here. So let me make a collection, and I'll call it Kscope. And so once I do that, I could say I want to put to this URL, which in REST parlance means create me a resource, right? So I'll send this put, and it doesn't look like anything happened, but if you look here under status, it says 201 created. So that means something was created. Well, let's go do a get on this same URL that includes the collection name and see what's there. And I see I've got nothing there. So let's put something there, like a document. So let me go grab this document, which is just a JSON document, and it's on the employees table, or not employees, but emp table. And I can send this document, but first I have to tell the service what I'm sending it, right? So I have to set a header called content type, and I'll say it's application JSON. In the body, then, which I don't have access to it until I change this to post, in the body, I'm going to send this raw JSON document. So let me go ahead and send that, and I get this JSON document back with an ID. Very nice. And so now I can access that document over REST just by appending that ID here and doing another get. And let me update that request. Try again. Oh well. Let me show you what actually happened though. So if you remember, I already enabled that schema for Application Express access in ECS. So I can go to SQL Workshop, and I can go to SQL Commands or Object Browser, change the schema to docs, and you'll see that case scope is there. So really, behind the scenes, it's just putting a table into this schema that I enabled for SOTA. And it's a very simple, it has an ID, created on version, and then this JSON document blob. So if I look at the data, there's that ID again, a version, and the JSON document would be in there. So then I could do things like write a SQL query using like JSON table or Apex JSON and use that in any Application Express element. But I'm not sure why you wouldn't just use relational data, but there is a reason. I know there's a use case for it, but I just don't know it being a relational database guy yet. So, but that's basically that. But we got to get moving here to get to the developer cloud service portion. And so let's go back to the presentation. And I'm going to have to make this really fast. So let's talk about the Developer Cloud Service. It's a cloud-based development platform and allows your developers to collaborate, to do automatic provisioning and builds. Includes a code repository like Git or Maven. And it also allows you to set up code reviews and assign tasks. So it really allows your developers to collaborate. But in the interest of time, I'm going to go straight into showing the Developer Cloud Service. And why you would care as an Application Express developer. So if I go back to my services here, go back to my dashboard, and I go to the Developer Cloud Service, and open its Service Console, you'll see that I have these two projects. I could create a new project if I want. I already pre-baked this Case Scope 17 project. And if you look at the home page, there's just like a dashboard that says all of the recent activity that happened. What's interesting to us is this code repository. And I'm going to copy this URL for the Git repository. And we can also go to the code tab and see what's in there. Currently, there really isn't anything in there. But the other thing that's interesting to you is this build tab, which allows you to create these jobs. It includes Hudson. So I can create jobs that will either execute a shell script, or what's interesting for you is execute SQL CL commands. So I can connect to other databases in the cloud and run some scripts. So let me do a video demo of this very quickly to show you what I mean, because as of today, the connection to the Exadata Express Cloud Service is not fully worked out yet. You need to be able to supply those client credentials, remember, that we downloaded and used in SQL Developer. But I can say that it's coming very soon. And I need to zoom out a little bit. So here I'm going to a build task, creating a new job, and I'm just calling it, push to EECS. I better stand closer. Now I go to source control, and I specify the Git repository. And I also can specify the branch. And I'm going to say the master branch is what I want to interact with. So now I have access to that in my job. I can set this trigger based on SCM. So when there's a commit to Git and we do the push, that means this job will run. So now I go ahead and I add my build steps, and I invoke SQL CL. And I'm going to connect to HR. I'm going to give it a password. Here's where I specify the credentials file. That's going to be in my Git repository. I could put it in a different folder and reference it that way, but I have it in the root. And I'm going to run this dml.sql file. And then I can add another build step, connect again, use my client credentials, and I'm going to reference employees app. So the idea was I made a change to that employees table. I added a country code column, so I have the DML to add the country code column, and then I have the application that I'm also going to check into the repository. And when that check-in happens, this build's going to kick off, and we're going to run dml.sql, employeesapp.sql. I'm going to do one more connection because I just wanted to show that since it's SQL CL, you don't have to just run SQL statements or SQL scripts. You have access to all the SQL CL statements. So you could do things like export, or you have this info plus command for employees. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that build. So now it's going to be ready to fire when I do a check-in to my Git repository. So I made my changes to the app, and I put it in the Git repository here, which I can access via SQL Developer. And if I had time, I'd show you that, but we're out. And so I add these new files, dml.sql, employees.sql. I'll do a commit. And then I will do a push so that these changes actually make it back to our master repository. And you can see I'm accessing a development environment. I'm not Claricoder. So now I pushed it. So what happens now is you'll see that a new build of this job is actually queued. And so I can just go, if I wanted to look at the code tab, verify that the new files that I put in there actually did show up in my repository. When I go back to the build tab, I see that this job is now 99% complete. And I can go ahead and look at the console and see what happened in this job. And so the first thing you'll see is that we ran this file, the table of employees was altered, updated some rows, so we set some default for the US, for the country code, and then we ran the employees app SQL script, which was an export of my application express application, and then we ran this info plus, this special SQL CL command, and got some more info. So the last thing to do would be to go to EECS and check to make sure. Oh, I also need to set the authentication scheme back because I overrid it when I made my change locally. So I changed the authentication to Cloud IDM again, and I verify that the changes have been made, and you'll see that I now have the country code column. But I am cutting into your lunch, and I do apologize about that. So I got to get to the features or the new features if you're interested in staying. All right, so one of the new features you just saw, and that's a new feature for EECS to allow you to specify those client credentials and connect to it. But also, there are going to be new shapes for the Exadata Express Cloud Service. I'm going to show you those different. It's going to offer more computing power and more storage. There will be a new modernized service console, so a UI improvement to the service console. And you'll also be able to create multiple workspaces in EECS, which means you could kind of have your own hosting thing if you really, really wanted to. And we're going to have factored internal administration. So it is your own Application Express instance, so why can't you access internal administration? The answer is because we can't allow you to do some things in internal administration, but some of the things you can do, like do some monitoring, create other workspaces, which we're going to support, so you'll be able to do that. So quickly, some of the new shapes. There's this X250, which really just gives you more storage, but it gets interesting once you get to the X500, where you get 4 CPUs and you get a higher SGA target of 7.5 gigabytes. And then we go up to terabyte services, where you get 8 CPU access and 15 gigabytes of memory, and if you get the IM option, you get 25 as well. Here's a couple slides showing the new crisp and clean service console that might look like Shakib worked on, and he actually did with his trusty sidekick Kyle. So just some more screens on that. If you're interested in what you saw today, especially with the developer cloud service, you would go to cloud.oracle.com/developer-service. And if you liked what you saw in EECS, go to cloud.oracle.com/database, and you can buy on shop.oracle.com. And I believe I mentioned DevCS is included once you buy EECS, so you get access to that. I didn't have to buy anything separately. So sorry about running late. Is there any final questions? We answered a lot of them during the presentation. Oh, that's a very good question. So the question was, if you start low, can you go high? Can you move from one shape to another? Currently, not yet. But that should be coming as well very soon. Safe harbor, obviously. All right, well, sorry again for going late. Part of it was your fault for asking all those questions during the presentation. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your case scope. And if you have any other questions, I'm here the rest of the week. Thank you.